Thinking about it, and we're on air. So welcome to the Midlife Retreat. This is a place where you can relax, rejuvenate and be inspired and just take a little bit of time away from the madness part of the world, the maddening world. Close the door behind you, put your feet up and take a nice relax. Today I've got Francesca Cassini with me, and before I introduce her, Francesca and I are going to take 2 deep breaths just to get us in the mood. Are you ready, Francesca? Yeah?
Yes.
Let's take one in and let it go. And another one. And let it go. Oh, I say it every week, but you know, that really just gets me in the mood for this. I do feel as if I've started a retreat when I've taken my deep breaths. So let me introduce you to Francesca. Francesca is an inspirational storyteller using real life stories to illustrate that when you follow your heart, come what may, you tap into collaborative essence of nature and nothing is impossible. She does this by challenging herself, producing personal stories through writing and video, sharing other people's inspirational stories, as well as writing visionary fiction. Her most recent major challenge was spending 4 months in an off-the-grid yurt in a secluded valley during the wettest winter in Wales. She has been an intuitive mentor for over 20 years, published the Changing Times magazine, and has been a founder member of a conscious living social network. The Silver Tent, her legacy project, has just been launched, serving women over 50 to reconnect them with their wisdom and reignite their dreams through an online community offering on and offline conferences, coaching and mentoring, luscious retreats and workshops, global travel experiences, and peer-to-peer meetups. Welcome, Francesca. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Kay. I'm delighted to be here.
We met this year, and I feel as if I've known you for a long, long time. You're like one of those ancient souls or ancient friends that you meet, and you just think, you know, we've got a connection. And I've just been dying to have you on the Midlife Retreat so that we can catch up and find out what's going on in your life.
Oh, brilliant. I've got this sort of sense that we have a sister energy.
Yeah, really I think
nice.
So. Yeah, I'm always got goose pimples when I talk to you because you're always got something challenging ahead. But before we go on to that, just tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us something so that people can get to know you a little bit.
Oh, well, do you want to give me a pointer? Like I've had 61 years of background.
Oh, well, tell us something, because you're a storyteller. Tell us something that happened to you when you were in your childhood. Just tell us a little story.
Oh, don't you just love being put on the spot? Thank you so much. Well, the one that comes to mind it was actually being in Portugal when my sister was very tiny. So she's 10 years younger than me, and I'm 61. So when she was, I think, less than a year old, we went with my family to Portugal for a summer holiday, and we drove all the way down in one of those VW camper vans, and we had a nanny there, and we had a nanny just for the trip, and the nanny and I did not get on. I couldn't stand her, and she used to tell my parents things about me that I don't think were actually true. So she would say things like she'd found me sleepwalking in the middle of the night and was worried that I would accidentally pick my sister up and throw her out of the window. So that was actually very scary for me, because even though I was convinced that I didn't sleepwalk, of course you don't know.
Yeah.
So I got surprisingly enough very anxious about that, and I hated her. And where we ended up on this holiday was in a beautiful villa with a swimming pool, but actually on the slopes of a dormant volcano. And my dad explained to me that dormant meant that it wasn't live and that it wasn't going to explode. But I was only about 10. And to me, every single night I went to sleep, it was with the horrifying thought that any minute now the volcano would erupt and we would die. So yeah, so that's just an indication of what level of anxiety I've lived with throughout my life, really.
And that's interesting, isn't it? I think it's a really good story to start our journey together now, because you're talking about a holiday experience and a volcano and anxiety and eruptions, and yet here you are, you've just erupted the silver tent, which we're going to come and talk about in a little while, still dealing with anxiety, and yet you put yourself recently into a yurt, which I've always wanted to live in. And it sounded ideal until you told me you were in the middle of nowhere in Wales in the wettest winter ever. Tell us a little bit how that experience went.
Well, of course, I didn't know it was going to be the wettest winter on record. I'd wanted to live in a yurt in a woodland ever since I went nomadic back in January 2018. And spent the first 2.5 months of that on a chateau estate in France. And I ended up there from early February through until April or something. And if I had gone back, I was going to stay in a yurt in the woodlands. And it was beautiful, fantastic 27 acres of pristine, untouched landscape. And I was totally in love with it. But actually, it didn't work out that I went back. So that idea of being in a yurt must have gone sort of underground, and I didn't think about it for quite a while. And then in 2015, I ended up on a five-week trip in Peru, and the final week was at an ayahuasca retreat in the Amazon jungle, and we had a little hut on stilts each. And of course, the rainstorms there are tropical. And even though I don't operate at all well in hot, humid environments, I absolutely loved being there. I loved being inside this little hut that was called a tambo, that was it was roofed with like palm fronds and things, you know. And when it rained there, the sound was just incredible. And when we would do the ayahuasca ceremonies deep into the night, we'd be in this circular sacred space called a maloca that was open to the elements all around the edge. And one night I remember there was this incredible rainstorm, and I was listening to this thundering sound of the rain on the mud outside. And then all the insects and the bullfrogs were making their noises, and the shaman was singing his Icaros songs. And all of these sounds just wove together all around me. And I thought I was in this incredible healing sound bath. And I felt really embraced by nature in a much deeper way than I had before. And when I came back to England, I found it almost impossible to be in a house, be around people. I just wanted to lie on the grass in the rain. I didn't actually do that, but that's what I wanted to do. And so I knew I had to go and move right out into the country. I was staying with friends in Hertfordshire, and I saw an advert for a room in a beautiful, very old farmhouse in Wales, in this beautiful area where I am now. And so I went to visit them, but they didn't know whether the room was going to become available for the winter. And I wanted to have certainty that I was moving there. And so they rent out yurts for holiday makers on their farm. And I said, well, how about I have one of the yurts? It just sort of came out of my mouth unexpectedly. And so the woman who's got the same name as me, she's a Fran, took me to see one particular yurt in this little, you had to go through a little woodland to get to it. And then there was this secluded hillside in this beautiful secluded valley. You couldn't see another house. There was no road, nothing, but this incredibly charming yurt that had a big, huge double bed in it, a table, a couple of chairs, a rocking chair, a wood burning stove, and a lovely deck that you could sit on outside with this just magical view. And I went, yeah, great. No electricity, no gas, no phone connection, nothing. And I was working online, writing for a spiritual talk company. And I went, no, I really want to come. Oh, so I did. I moved in on the 10th of November 2015 and stayed there through till March 2016. And then discovered it was the wettest winter in Wales. I just hardly ever stopped raining. And when you're in a yurt, because it's made of canvas, it's like being inside a drum. It's the loudest thing you have ever heard. And because I was on the hillside and all those storms, remember oh, no, you probably don't know, but people in the UK will remember the number of storms we had, almost went right through the alphabet. I got really good at telling the different personalities and characters of the storms. I could see them with shape and texture and personality. And it was very, very interesting and completely terrifying for me. You can't be a storyteller without having a lot of imagination. And imagination is great when you're thinking about things that you like. But I can't turn my imagination off and not let it give me all the dark side. So I'm as good as creating the most horrific ideas as I am about the most inspirational. So I had a lot of great fear.
and the story you told us about your childhood, well, tell us a little bit that you've always suffered from anxiety. So tell us a little bit about your anxiety.
Oh, well, I wouldn't want to invite anybody else to be inside my head for very long. It is a very scary place and a very discombobulating place to be sometimes. When I'm really focused on what inspires me, then it's phenomenal. But the flip side can happen effortlessly, particularly when I'm not focused on one particular thing. So, for example, I'd be lying in bed in my yurt, loving it. I mean, it was the most magical space and I totally adored it. But I was on the slope of a really steep hillside and it rained and it rained and it rained. And so the anxiety part of my imagination wondered if it was at all possible that there could be a mudslide, because there was a mudslide, a number of years ago in Cornwall that, killed a lot of people and, swept cars down the hillside. And I was in a canvas yurt. And I thought that would be a lot of mud above me. If that came down and swept me down into the bottom of the valley, I wouldn't get out of that. And so I could imagine myself, it was horrible, being trapped with a little tiny bit of air under tons of mud in the dark until I died. And then once you have that image, it's incredibly hard to shift it. So then what happens is my heart starts to race. And then I think I'm going to have a heart attack. I sound like a complete basket case, and I often feel like one. So the level of anxiety is incredibly high. So my pulse rate must go high. And then, when I get anxious, then I'll start to feel a little bit dizzy. And then often I could feel like the yurt slightly moved. Now, maybe it did. I don't know, because it's on a wooden platform above the ground. So it's possible that it did. But it was, it's like trying to harness a whole load of wild horses, or it's like herding cats, just a little bit more sinister than that inside my head. So many nights I would not be able, well, I didn't sleep very well anyway. I've had quite chronically bad sleep for probably a decade, although touch wood, actually, I'm sleeping really well at the moment, but I didn't in the yurt. So I had hours and hours of trying to work through this deep anxiety. And the only way that I could do it, apart from focusing on something that inspired me, which would take me out of it for a while and sometimes work, was to be rational and go, that would be a really freak accident and the likelihood of it happening is really remote. But so I live in that. I live in that.
So being rational and breathing become really important for you.
Yes, but there are certain times when rationality doesn't work. So if I'm worrying about my health, if I think I'm just about to die, being rational doesn't help at all, because the feeling is so completely irrational. If somebody said, why do you think you're just about to die? I couldn't.
We're told
feeling that is not a symptom of impending death.
We were talking earlier as well before we went online. I'm hoping that if somebody can just tell me in the chat whether you've got me or whether it's Francesca who's dropped.
I can only see your picture. I can't.
Okay. The lines are obviously not very good. It'll come out on the replay. Okay, though. So we were talking just before we went live, and both of us said we really wish this was chatting live rather than in the back office. And we were saying that there's a real fine line between excitement and anxiety, and it's finding the balance so that you tip yourself towards the excitement on a regular basis and not towards the anxiety.
Yes, I think that, if you're going away on holiday and you get that butterfly feeling in your stomach, it is pretty much the same as feeling anxious, isn't it? They're brothers or sisters or whatever. I think it depends what you're doing. I think if you're going to an interview, then you can use that like, oh, I'm really excited because if I got whatever the end result is of that interview, then you can go into that space. I think if you're feeling like you're just about to die, it's quite difficult to find where that excitement might be. And so I think a lot depends on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also if you know your your deep inner core values, you can use those to help you. So as you said, with exams, it's a lot easier than it is dealing with the impending feeling of death. If you're a person who needs to know knowledge, then obviously dealing with an exam leads you to your next level of knowledge. So that stress and that anxiety is part of your core values. You can't have one without the other.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure. I think we're going to be talking about death in a couple of weeks' time, and I think that might be a really good time to bring up, the anxiety then. With another guest.
I think so. I've just got something that I'd like to share actually about not specifically about anxiety and excitement, but what's becoming really clear to me is that if you're feeling one thing like anxiety, and then you try and feel whatever you think is the opposite of that, a not anxiety, then often what you're doing is you're just going to the other end of like a pendulum. And if you do that, just like a pendulum, you'll come back to the other side. If you're feeling sad and you try and make yourself happy, unless you've resolved something, you're going to come back to that sadness. It's like you can't deny that energy that's going on. And so for me, what I found the most valuable thing is to go to the higher. It's like, what is the end result that I would love? So one of the things that I would do in the yurt, particularly at night, was one of the reasons that I went there was because I wanted to fall in love with the dark. I'm quite wimpy when it comes to the dark, and of course I was surrounded by a lot of it. And it got dark at 4:20 or something for some of that winter. So once I remembered that, it's like, oh yeah, I want to fall in love with the dark. So that would start to bring my attention to something slightly different, and then I would explore that fear and what was going on around me slightly differently. So yeah, just wanted to.
I think that's a fabulous comment. I love that idea as well. I think it's something really that we can all remember and utilize. So thank you for sharing that one.
Pleasure.
So there you were in your yurt. dealing with possible landslides and really weird animals outside your door and dark and rain and wind. And you had this inspiration for the silver tent. So tell us a little bit about the silver tent and where that came from.
Well, it was very much a germination thing from the yurt. So by the time I got to close to the end of my stay in the yurt, what I realized was, yes, I might have anxiety and I might worry about things to an extreme degree, but I'm still wise and resourceful beyond what I remembered, that I could handle being alone. I could handle being away from people. I could build my own fire. I could deal with it all. You know, I didn't need to have a shower and a toilet within arm's reach, was what I always thought. And, you know, my nails would be disgustingly dirty for days. And so I thought, if everything went completely haywire in the world and we lost our main things like electricity and gas and stuff, I would survive. I'd handle it. I wouldn't crash. And that was a remarkable feeling, to realize that I was a much stronger person than I thought I was, particularly at 60 when I was there. And I thought, wouldn't it be a remarkable thing to be able to offer this to other women, particularly as they get older, who, you know, maybe their children have left home, maybe they've left their partner or their business or whatever. And, you know, I know a lot of women, when they get to sort of 50 and 60, sometimes forget who they really are. You know, if they've identified themselves as mother, lover, CEO, or whatever it is, then when those things are not so important, they might forget who they really are. Mm-hmm. And so I was toying with the idea of how could I create somewhere where there would be secluded yurts, but you wouldn't be isolated. So you need to be able to find somebody. You just don't want to be saved by somebody before you need it. Mm-hmm. And so that really was the germination of the silver tent, but I hadn't quite got that far at that particular point. But I found that my attention was coming much, much more to women at this stage of life, at 50, 60, 70, that kind of span. And realizing also, in fact, when I was out in Peru, beginning to get the start of it there too, this sense that we're really wise elders, but we're not classed as that in our society. In indigenous cultures, yes, but not in our Western society. We're just older and old, and sometimes really old, and past our sell-by date, and pretty invisible, and just, you know, maybe a drain on the society's resources. So I found that I was heading much more towards looking at what we had as a demographic, and really sensing this deep wisdom that all of us have, no matter what kind of life we've had, but just simply by the fact that we've made it to 50, 60, 70, we have a wealth of experience to share way beyond the youngsters. Yeah. You know, so that's really where it came from. And then all of a sudden, this idea of creating a global community online initially, so that elder women, so over 50, even if you're just only over 50, you know, don't be horrified that I call you elder. I mean that with the greatest of respect. Is I just think that we're the most phenomenally untapped resource. And that if every woman over 50 really recognized that they were a wise woman and had something of value to share with the wider community, even if that was just their family, and we came together with that, I think we could resolve the most enormous amount of challenges on our planet. And makes me feel really emotional when I think about that, because in an indigenous culture, the wise elders are valuable. And we've just forgotten. And if we take back that value, if we own it again and start exploring what can we do with that, it's like having a talent and not using it, isn't it? If we take that, our wisdom as a talent and a skill and a gift to the world and then work together to take it out there. Oh my God, what could we do? So that's really what the Silver Tent is. It's a community to remind women in whatever way it is relevant to them that they're a wise elder, and they're wild, wonderful, and wise elder women, and together we can make a massive difference.
And I've got pimples thinking about it, because that's how we met. And your little Silver Tent Facebook group, which the link is in the chat at the side, has really made a huge impact, I think. It's a growing community. You've over 1,000 members already. And what I really love about it is the level of conversation that goes on in the group. You know, I do have my own little group, and I find it a little bit frustrating in that it seems to be a one-way conversation, you know, with me and a few likes and a few comments. But your group doesn't do that. Everybody gets involved, and it's a wonderful, expressive place to be. I think it's really exciting.
It's fantastic, isn't it? I'm really humbled and awed, you know, when one of the members of the group comes in and they're vulnerable enough to say, I'm having a problem in my relationship. You know, I don't know whether to stay with my husband or not, and I'm frightened, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And they've been so vulnerable to say that to a group, and we've got over 1,200 people in there now. Mm-hmm. And then the level of support that comes from the other members who say, you're wise, you're amazing. And they all share their own little perspective and their own bit of wisdom, but they might get 40, 50, 60 responses. Mm-hmm. Serving them and supporting them. They're always such supportive things to say. And I just think, wow, you know, this is incredible. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And oh, it's just amazing. And it's so full of love and support and wisdom.
And very much strong, very strong. Mm-hmm. And so you've just completed a summit as well, which I know must have been extremely exhaustive work, because I know just running a weekly webinar takes its toll on me. Exciting people you had. Tell the audience a little bit about your actual summit.
Oh, it was brilliant. I so enjoyed every single conversation that I had as an interview, you know, just like you are. It's like doing this, isn't it? It's lovely. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky enough to know some people that are relatively well known. So like Lynn McTaggart, I know her well enough to ask if she would join us. And she said, you know, immediately yes, which was brilliant. And the same with Gertrude Matche, who quite a few people in the personal growth arena will know as well. So it was wonderful being able to interview them. And then I got people who aren't well known at all, but have a really powerful story and a powerful, abiding passion that is valuable for us to know. So there was Rosemary Kelly, who is passionate about using laughter as a healing technique, mainly for women who've been through breast cancer. And I won't go into all the reasons, but it was just fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then there was Cheryl and Linda who talk about oxytocin, and which they call the big O. And you know, oxytocin comes from hanging out with your women friends and from feeling good, and it's this incredibly powerful hormone that really serves us. And we get it much more than men. You know, nature was brilliant in that effect. So we had this whole thing about, you know, laughter and joy, and you know, Dorothy West, who decided when she was 60 that she was going to have the best year of her life so far. And she decided to train and participate in what's called a Spartan race, which is 5 kilometer horrific obstacle course race. And she did it, and she climbed over walls and she climbed up, you know, ropes. And I mean, it was astonishing to hear. And then we got people like Lynn talking about the power of intention. And then I had this amazing conversation with a woman called Julia Capelli, who works for the Wolf Connection.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yes, wasn't that just astonishing?
Especially when the wolves joined in at the end. That was just unbelievable.
So magical. But just how she shared about the wisdom of wolves and how she embodies the wisdom of wolves. And she lives by the pack credo. And that, when you were reading out my bio, that sense of, when we follow our heart, come what may, we tap into that collaborative essence of nature. That's sort of what I mean. She followed her heart to be there, and now she's getting her wisdom from the wolves. And 24 amazing women talking about a whole host of different things. It was just brilliant. Yes, lots of technological challenges. And then, of course, Virginia McKenna, the actress, who is one of my favorite of all time, and, who played Joy Adamson in Born Free. And I had such a lovely conversation with her. So I now want to really build on the connections that I've made and the work that I've done to draw in many more of these women from all around the world, whether they're what we consider ordinary, but are extraordinary. That's what's so cool about this, Kay, and I'm sure you find that with your interviews.
Definitely.
We think we're ordinary, but we're not. We're all extraordinary. We all are. We just might not see it in ourselves. So to be able to really share that through the Silver Tent, and to share, not just share it with people from outside and go, look, you can be like this, but to draw that out of the membership as well. To go, look, you think you're ordinary, but you're not.
I think that's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your visions for the future of the Silver Tent, because we talked a little bit about it, where it is now. Yes. So where is it going? This need to help each other and help the world.
Well, I've been in the businesses that I've been involved in prior. I've read things like Wikinomics and quite a few books on a new way of being. Like collaborative, that kind of thing, like gig economy. The things that on the whole are very natural to women when they're not caught up in the masculine world and think they have to match men. But our natural way of being that is collaborative because it makes more sense. So I've been interested in creating business around this more feminine approach for a long time, but whenever I've worked for somebody else, even if they've wanted it, I've not been in the driving seat, and somehow it's come apart. But being the founder of the Silver Tent means that I am in the driving seat. And so the whole structure is built on intuition, creativity, collaboration, and the ethos is that every decision that we're about to make, whatever we're looking at, it has to serve the membership, the wider community beyond the membership, the Silver Tent itself, and the people who look after it, the team that run it. So everything has to serve every aspect of what we're dealing with. And so there's the part of the Silver Tent that serves women to rediscover their extraordinariness, if you like, their wisdom. Then there's the part of the coaches that have already found that and can share that with the others. So there's this sense of really working together within the membership itself. But there's no point in having a membership where we just go, oh, isn't it lovely being wise? We've got to do something with it. So then there's the aspect of the Silver Tent where we ripple that wisdom out into the world in whatever way is appropriate for each one of us. So nobody will be asked to do something that isn't in their core nature. But one Saturday, as I was putting this all together, I was, I daydream a lot because, that's also part of my nature. And I thought, what could we do with it? Let's say we get this to really work well, and all these women around the world are absolutely loving this. So what could we do? And I thought, well, what if we had 1 million women, at least 1 million women as members of the Silver Tent? Wow, okay, well, that's a lot of women, but I think it's doable. Well, what if half of those were fee-paying members? So we've got free membership and then 2 fee-paying levels. I thought, so what happens if, say, half of them were fee-paying? And that's only, $100, just under $100 a year. It's not very much. And what they get for it, I think, is amazing. So I thought, well, that would be a revenue of about $50 million a year. I just thought, whoa, hang on a second, that's a ridiculous amount of money. So I thought, okay, well, if we had 1 million women in the community, it would take a lot to service that, because the IT, I've no idea how much the IT structures would cost. But even if it cost 10 million to run, even if it did, we'd have $40 million left. Now, most companies put that into, like, you know, big fat cat salaries and bonuses and their shareholders and its profit, and you know, I don't know what they do with it. But I thought, but if we had $40 million worth of profit, well, what would we do with that? Because I don't need it. So I thought, wow, so what if we put that into a foundation? And what if we then asked the membership, what projects have they had just sort of floating around? You know, the things that you always wanted to do if you ever found a way of being able to do it. But projects that were life affirming, that were transformational, that were environmental, you know, anything that would serve our world and our species and wildlife too. So what if we asked the membership if they had a burning project to submit that project to the foundation? And what if we then got the membership to vote on which projects could receive our funding and then funded them? I thought, oh my God, like if we had $40 million a year funding projects created by our membership, like what could we do out in the world with that? So I thought, wow. And then we put them together with the coaches that we have already in the faculty to help them bring that to fruition, which would include business coaches. And then we asked the community who wants to help. So if somebody is building an orphanage in, I don't know, Kathmandu, do any of the membership want to go help build it? So we actually get the people on the ground as well. Well, my head nearly blew off at that point when I thought of the power that we could create just through this really neat little membership structure. We could create a self-perpetuating philanthropic engine, and each one of us could live like the philanthropist that we've always probably, like I've always wanted to be a philanthropist, the philanthropist that we've always wanted to be. Now, if I can inspire people, women all around the world to go, oh, wow, right? Oh my God.
I get it.
And it's not going to cost me much, and I'm going to get so much out of it, and I can give so much back. I can make this third phase of my life the most meaningful, the most powerful, and absolutely the most celebratory. Oh, that's it, really.
I think I need to sit down. I think it's good job I'm sitting down, actually. I think I need to sit down. I think it's good job I'm sitting down, actually.
I would love it.
When you first told me that story, I was covered in goose pimples, and I must admit, I'm still covered in goose pimples the second time around. I think it's an amazing story and an amazing vision, and I feel very honoured to be part of the growing community, and it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to the next stage. I know we're coming up to the end of the couple of questions about going on a retreat. They're nothing to do with the topic that we've just been talking about. They're just general questions I ask everybody, and you just need to give me a one-word answer.
One word.
So, are you ready for this?
Not the easiest thing
just
for me, but
word.
okay. Right.
Okay, breathe in then. Take a breath in. Okay, we go. First question. What's the one thing that stresses you about going on holiday?
The flight.
Okay, good one. Second question. What's the one thing you always take on holiday?
My laptop.
Okay. And what's the one thing you wish you'd left
My
behind?
laptop.
I don't know you was going to say that one. What's the one thing you need to ditch right now, mentally or physically? Ditching baggage.
Fear.
Fear, good one. And what's the one thing you love to do, which is sensibly selfish? Sensibly selfish is my word for putting yourself first, so that you're all full of energy and in the right
facials
place. Good one. Like that one too. And what's the worst advice you were ever given at midlife?
In one word.
No, I'll give you, go on,
probably
go for
that going to the yurt was a really stupid thing to do.
And now look where it's taking you.
Yeah, exactly.
And now look where it's taking you. It wasn't a stupid thing to do at all, was it? If anybody wants to talk to you, Francesca, where can they find you? There's a link to the Silver Tent Summit, but if you've got an email or something, if you want to type it into the chat, please do so, and then people can get hold of you. And while you're typing, I'm just going to ask Vanessa if she's still there. If Vanessa's got any questions for you before we round up. I'm trying to look and see if I can't get to the questions. Lucy's had to leave because it's totally echoing for her and she can't listen in, which is a real shame.
Yes, I could hear some of the echo myself.
We'll see what the replay comes out like. It should be okay. Francesca at thesilvertent.com. Fantastic. Francesca, it's been... Vanessa says you're an excellent inspiration to us all, which is very, very true.
I just want to add something quickly, can I?
I just want
and Vanessa, definitely for you and anyone else listening, is that if I can do it, anyone can. And I believe that utterly to be the truth. If you have an idea, it doesn't have to be the same idea as mine, but if I can do something, so can you. Definitely.
I think that's very, very true, and it's you are a huge inspiration to us when we see where you've come from over just 12 months. I can't wait to see where you're going to go in the next 12 months. It's going to be so exciting. Thank you for being with us today. I'm just going to introduce my guest for next week. Next week, I'm going to be talking to a non-midlife lady, and she's still in her 30s, called Petra Ivan. But Petra and I have been working for the last 90 days together on a program called Wild Fit, and I've lost 14 kilos. And so she's going to come and talk about the program that we did together. And so it's all about health and diet and exercise and nutrition and all the good things. So I'm really looking forward to speaking to Petra next week. Thank you once again for being with us, everybody. Vanessa, thank you for being here. If you get the replay, don't forget to get in touch with Francesca at the Silver Tent. The 2 links are in the chat at the side, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. So I'm going to turn off now, and that means, Francesca, I have to say goodbye to you. So I'll catch you on Facebook soon.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.